welcome folks, Fearless Filmmaker event here.
Roll sound. Cameras rolling.
Hi, I'm Dan Orozco. Welcome back to Butter City. Our guest today is Ali Selim. In the second part of a two-part show, we'll talk to Ali about the development of the short story, A Gravestone Made of Wheat, into the feature film, Sweetland. Besides winning numerous film festival awards, Sweetland won the Independent Spirit Awards Best First Feature Film. Please welcome back to Butter City, Ali Selim.
Thanks for having me back.
So we talked a little bit about casting and kind of how you developed Sweetland into where it is today, kind of from the business aspect, but from a personal aspect and how you approach the story of an immigrant. Just kind of reading bios and other interviews, you talked about a trip to Egypt that you took with an uncle.
Well, we took a lot of trips to Egypt. My father's from Egypt. He came in the 50s to study in the United States and ended up staying and becoming a professor first at the university and then at St. Thomas. And so I think we visited Egypt maybe 6 or 7 times when I was a kid. And the last time I went with some buddies from high school, and they all went on a tour of ancient Egypt. And I stayed back with one of my uncles, and we went on a crazy little trip. He came to pick me up because he wanted to buy his daughter some ringa, some smoked fish. And we went looking for all the shops for the smoked fish. And this turned into a 3-day trip with no luggage, just driving all through the Nile Delta region where my father grew up. And he showed me all the places where, you know, my grandfather had built and my grandfather had become who he was, and where my dad had studied and where the kids had played and all these things. And I mean, I was 18 and you sort of don't care about those things at the time, but he said to me, you know, I'm showing you all this because if you don't know where you come from, you have no idea where you're going. And I was like, yeah, whatever, let's go get the fish, you know? But it really stuck with me. And I think that stewardship of your heritage, or at least knowledge of your heritage, if not stewardship of your heritage, is an extremely valuable thing in this world and in this age of globalization and in the internet and where everything is moving and blending. I think it's really great to understand who you are and why you are. And I think that idea permeated a lot of my love for the short story Gravestone Made of Wheat.
Yeah, it certainly is a big theme. I mean, it's kind of the conflict as the character deals with, should he sell the land or not? And he looks back at this. That's how we get into the story, is kind of the stewardship of his history. I mean, is there a character you identify with yourself in there?
Inga.
You see yourself as Inga?
Yeah.
Because you changed it to her perspective, didn't you? The
Yeah.
short story was from...
The short story is from Olaf's perspective. Inga dies and Olaf has to bury Inga on the land. And I think that's a really beautiful story that Will told. I don't know why it changed. It sort of evolved rather than changed. It sort of evolved across talking to elderly actors to play Olaf and finding that most elderly actors want to be in action movies and have a sex scene with Scarlett Johansson, right? They don't want to play an older farmer with his wife of 50 years. They want to play like some young action, which is, I mean, I was like, okay, so I'm not going to get Gene Hackman to do this. I'm not going to get Robert Duvall to do this. So that was part of it. And another part of it, I think, is that Inga's the immigrant. And the story has a little different oomph. I mean, they're both immigrants, but in Will's story, Inga's the one who comes over. She has the action of coming over in the story. And for her to make that final statement that this is my land now and I'm going to put my husband in it, I thought was potent in a different way. And I think it just evolved into that for that reason.
And you said you really see this just as a love story.
Yeah, I think you have to. I mean, I think that's the easiest way to make a film.
Is that the way you see the story, or is that the way you approached it? I mean, because there seems to be a lot there that would be hard to ignore.
Yeah, actually, I think Will's story is a love story. I think my script is a love story. Plan is a love story. I think it's a very rich love story because it's got a lot of texture to it, but it's ultimately just a love story.
I know my mother would disagree. She sees so much in it. A lot of immigrants who come over really take a lot away from the film and see their own personal experience.
But they don't see it not as a love story.
No.
They think it's a love story and it's got a lot of texture to it,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Let's take a look at the trailer.
Great.
From the film.
Jeg har overnattet i et fremmed hus med en harmo. Jeg har ikke hatt et sted på meg selv siden på krigen. Og ikke vi er obligift, og til bad. Og det vil være god med Fransen? Nei!
You sure you want to marry this one?
Welcome, Inge. Oh, I'll bet you need a bath.
Bad? No? Okay.
Oh, left-handed.
Sweetland, a love story of ideals, of believing and belonging.
Inga, even though you've never met this man, Olaf, are you ready to get married?
She only speaks this much English. She's charming.
German.
German.
We speak a common language, we have a common background, common culture.
German nationals engage in prostitution. They encourage polygamy.
There can be no wedding ceremony today. Not today.
German. What were you thinking of, Torvik?
Hey!
Let her have it.
Those are my things.
Not if you don't pay your mortgage.
We'll pay after the harvest.
You got just a month.
Dreams, yes, you have.
I have work. I don't have dreams.
You're dancing together, you're living together. God only knows what else. What else? You're Germanists, it's a disruption to my community.
This is her place now.
How can it be?
You can let it be. I'm married. In my heart, I believe.
Winner of the Audience Award for Best Picture at the Hamptons International Film Festival, Sweetland.
An effective trailer. Tells the story.
I'm glad you think so.
You see it. You see the story in it. Talk about creating that trailer. Did you farm it out to someone and they came back with it and you loved it?
No. It was, you know, Jeff Lipsky was the distributor, and I think he's a genius at marketing films and theatrically. And he has an idea of what a trailer is, and I think as a filmmaker, I had an idea of what a trailer was. And we did actually start with a company in LA who sent us a trailer that I realized they didn't even get the film. They'd probably watched it on a DVD at home. And, you know, it's for whatever it is or isn't, it's really filled with life. And it's filled with a lot of like communal humor. And when I've seen the film at festivals with a sold-out audience, there's a lot of laughter. And I think the people who were watching at the trailer company were watching it on a DVD. I think they just saw kind of a dour film about an evil minister who was prohibiting this marriage, and they came back with a trailer like that. And I thought, that's no good. And so I turned it over to Lipsky, who said, this is, you know, what we're going to do. And I think it was a little hard for Jim Stanger, my good friend and the editor of Sweetland, because we didn't really feel like this was communicating some of the feeling in the film. And Jeff said, you know, this is really, a trailer is not about your movie. A trailer is about a movie, trying to get people to go see a movie. And I fought him on it, and I didn't really, honestly, I didn't get it until I went the first night at the Edina when our trailer was showing before Lassie. And this was sandwiched between a football movie with tremendous sound effects and light effects and the Kung Fu movie that came out last winter. And this came up, and I was like, oh, I get it. It's not about my movie. It's about attracting people to my movie and understanding that it's going to be sandwiched between, you know, who knows what, you know, which is interestingly something I always told my clients when I was working on commercials is you're not competing against the hospital across town. You're competing against the Nike ad for attention because your commercial could come up just before the Nike ad or just after the Coke commercial. And you have to think in those terms, not in terms of what are the guys across town doing. Because the guys across town, their commercial may not be showing for another 3 weeks and nobody's going to compare the two. You're going to get people's attention because you were better than the Nike commercial.
Yeah, at that moment.
And it's the same with the trailer.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it looks gorgeous too. I mean, you're a director of photography, had great scenery to work with.
Dave Tumblety.
Dave Tumblety. I mean, it was gorgeous. Minnesota is so beautifully photographed. And I often think that when I drive across in the summer, it's like, gosh, this should be featured in more movies. It was captured so well. Talk about working with your DP as far as creating a look. Did you have a lot of pre-production meetings, or was it just kind of naturally there for you since Minnesota has such gorgeous expanses to photograph?
Well, unfortunately for Dave, the look was in my head for 16 years, as you so wonderfully pointed out. I mean, I had seen this film play top to bottom so many times that I had to be open to other people's, you know, perspectives. Eden Miller, the costume designer, Jim Bockham, the production designer, Dave Tumblety. You know, probably not Jim Stanger, because I think Jim Stanger, the editor, had seen the film as many times as I had, because we've been friends since before I read the short story. But some of these other people who came along, I don't think they had to battle my sense of what it looked like, but they really had to figure out that I had a really clear sense of what it looked like. And Dave showed up, he read the script and he showed up to our first meeting, not with film references or, thank God, not with a copy of Days of Heaven, which, you know, everybody's like, wheat? Oh, let's, you know, here's a great reference. He showed up with Andrew Wyeth books. He showed up with Edward Hopper books. He even showed up with a couple of reference cards of Mark Rothko, who's my favorite painter, leaves me almost speechless. And if you're an astute Rothko historian, you'll see a little bit of his, at least palette influence in this. So I was pleased to find a guy who, from the get-go, didn't have to hear me obtusely talk about how painters were my reference, but brought his own, and they happened to be exactly mine. So. And
there's a lot of painterly framing, you know, kind of stand back, wide, take it in, kind of sky expanse with the field. I mean, it is.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that comes from. I think, you know, I'm just old enough to be a product of 70s cinema, and I'm just old enough to be cynical about current Hollywood cinema. And so I think that's just the way I think. That's the way I see at least this particular story unfolding. I mean, there's also an aspect from my advertising career where I'm a generalist, and my job is to tell the story in the way that that particular story or concept begs to be told. And this story is not about moving camera and cutting, you know?
Well, that's the thing. A lot of the scenes are really allowed to breathe. The actors are allowed to stretch out emotionally without saying anything. You know, as Elizabeth Reeser said, I think in an interview, it's a film about listening. And when you're watching it, you really get that chance to explore with the actors, too. It's like just taking it in, just listening, and not just waiting for the other person to stop talking.
Which is actually the profound statement that I think got her the part. She said that in the audition, and I thought, she really gets it. It's not about the accent. It's not about the talking, because it's not subtitled, so the idea is nobody's supposed to understand what it's about, including the characters in the scene. Right. So the fact that it's about listening, and that's the way Jim Stanger cuts it too, if you watch. It's really about listening. I thought that was very observant of Elizabeth.
Let's take a look at another clip from the film.
Great.
Even though you've never met this man, Olaf, are you ready to get married? No, only English in the church. Only English.
She only speaks this much English.
Well, yes? Spreekt u Deutsch? Deutsch?
Oh, Gott sei Dank. Ich kann nicht mit jemandem sprechen. Es ist so einsam, wenn man niemanden hat. Ich wusste nicht, dass es eine so große Einsamkeit gibt. Ich bin eine deutsche Fräulein, ganz allein in diesem Land. Meine Familie ist ganz weit weg. Was ist das?
Nein. English only in the church. English.
Your parents sent you a girl to be married. They didn't tell you that she was German?
No. Well, how could you not know?
My parents wrote me that there was a girl who would be
We
good
were
to
at
her.
war with Germany. Yes, Francis.
Martin Luther was German. German.
My first 3 marriages were arranged just like that. That's
fabulous.
Yeah, that's interesting. Talk about, I know that right before we went to that clip, you were saying that how her scenes were not subtitled when she was speaking German. That kind of creates a sense of the outsider. We're the outsider. We don't know what she's saying, and it kind of reflects what she's going through most of the time. Did you have to talk anyone into keeping it that way? Has there been anyone pushing back saying, come on, subtitle it?
Everybody. But yeah, but as my friend Jim Bigham, who produced the film, said, enjoy this because this is the only time in your life you'll make a film without adult supervision. And I really did have that going for me. I mean, my partners who, Ed Driscoll and Tom Lieberman, who helped me raise the money, you know, they knew this was kind of my show. And so there really wasn't anybody that I had to answer to. And I just believed that that was the best way to do it, was to create that sense of confusion and keep it for everybody. But everybody who saw it early on, you know, before the reviews started coming in, were like, you're nuts. I mean, you have to subtitle it. Will that be in the next print? And I would just say, no. So, but I know I can't do that next time. I'm sure there'll be a team that I have to speak to.
You're working with more adult supervision?
I'll have total adult supervision, yeah.
On this film, I want to talk about the carbon neutral aspect of it. I mean, when you made the film, you said like a lot of people really didn't know what carbon neutral meant, and talk about like how you kind of got started on that.
Yeah, well, it was actually a combination of a Dave Grohl album, Foo Fighters album, and I just saw the little carbon neutral logo in the back, and which at the time was called Future Forests, and it invited me to go on the website and plant a tree in honor of Dave Grohl. So I did, and I started to look into it, and I thought, you know, I'm sure, I mean, living in Minnesota, we follow those kind of paths, you know, we recycle and we do what's right, and it just sort of, I think, more naturally comes to us than it does to people in Manhattan who are hanging on for a different kind of survival.
Yeah.
And so I was drawn to it, I researched it, and found that essentially what it is you keep track of the CO2 that you generate through, you know, tracking airline tickets purchased, the weight of the people that you bought those airline tickets for, the miles driven. You try to carpool whenever possible, just basically burning fewer fossil fuels. But ultimately, we all generate CO2. We boil water for tea, we breathe, we drive our cars. And so you keep track of what you do, and then you send it to these scientists in Glasgow, which sounds very scientific, but ultimately it's just a very simple equation. I read this great article called The Energy Diet, which you can get online, and it explains how they do it, which is, you know, there's like a CO2 generated per pound per airline mile flown. So it's a very easy calculation to figure out. And then you buy offsets, which means you invest in projects that are non-carbon generating. And for this particular, for the offsets in Sweetland, we bought windmills in Jamaica, or helped to build windmills in Jamaica, and some reforestation in Germany. And that made our film carbon neutral, which is sort of a, you know, it's a way of reducing your guilt for how filthy filmmaking is, and it's really filthy.
It's a wasteful business.
Very wasteful business. But, you know, at the time I had to convince everybody that this was not only the right thing to do, but a good thing for the film, because it would have people look at us, and give people another reason to look at us. And I think, you know, one of the battles when you go out to distribute a film is getting good reviews, but in some cities on some weekends getting a review at all. Because if you're opening with 10 other films and they're only reviewing 8, you may be the one that doesn't get reviewed, which means nobody's going to go see it. And then the second thing is getting features written about you. And there's only so many times that the 16 years in the making can get a feature written about you. And so this carbon neutral thing was just coming up. You know, there was a lot more talk. Al Gore's movie was coming out, and people were like, what is that? And got us a lot of features and got a lot of people to go see the film. I don't think they would go see it because it was carbon neutral, but it brought their attention to the name Sweetland. So
Do you think you can do another one like this?
I'll always do it. It's like so effortless, and ultimately it saves money. So I think convincing, if my next film is a studio film or a mini studio film, it's going to take nothing to convince them to make it carbon neutral. And now you don't have to explain what carbon neutral means, because it's such a, you know, Al Gore has helped me out in that way. So I can just say, let's do it. Here's what you'll save. Here's what it'll cost you. And I can't imagine they won't do it.
What would Al Gore do?
Yeah, exactly. That's what my wristband says.
Say that to everybody.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what's coming up. What are your next?
I have no idea. I mean, I'm still distributing Sweetland. I'm a big part of that. I'm partnered with Jeff Lipsky and my wife Robin, and we work 24/7 on getting Sweetland out in the world. It's
you retain most of that process yourself?
I don't know that I would say I retain it, but Lipsky was in retirement at the time and had become a filmmaker of his own and had left distribution. He said, I'll come out of retirement and I'll do this for you, but you have to help me because I have no infrastructure. And so I became Jeff Lipsky's assistant, which is a lot different than I'm going to retain control over distribution.
Interesting perspective.
Yeah, and it's been great. I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot from being on the road so long with this film, learning what, you know, how watching it with audiences, learning what they think about it. So I'm ready to move on. DVD comes out on July 10th from Fox Home Entertainment, which is going to be great. And at that point, I feel like maybe it's time to move on.
To look on something else.
I'm doing an adaptation of Pete Houtman's book Godless, which won the National Book Award 2 years ago. I'm doing an adaptation for Universal Pictures, Universal Studios, of a book called Colony Girl by Thomas Raphael. And I have a project with my good friend Ned Beatty, who has had this book called The Book of Beb for many, many years, and asked if I wanted to do it with him, because I think he enjoyed his experience working on Sweetland. And he thought I got all the shots, which is what he tells people. And they say, why, did you like working with him? He said, yeah, that guy got all the shots. So I don't know what that means, but if it gets me to work with him again, he's such a fine actor and a national treasure that I look forward to it. And so we're working on that. So I'm writing 3 adaptations simultaneously, and I hope that none of them take 16 years to make.
Do you want to do your own stuff? Do you want to write something ground up?
Sure.
Great.
Yeah, I don't know why I've turned to adaptations. I really don't. I like the process. I find a lot of original scripts. There are some, I mean, there are exceptions to every rule. You know, Charlie Kaufman is a genius, and some of these other. But I find that a lot of original scripts are like just really sound structural plot pieces, and they don't have the character depth or richness that good fiction, you know, prose writing can bring to a film. So
they're like extended sitcoms.
I don't, you know, they're just like, or you know, who's got the bomb, or when's the bomb going to go off, and I just don't know. But I have ideas. I just find it more satisfying to go into a book and pull something out. But that may change. I'm sure I'll do something someday.
Cool. Let's take a look at our third clip from Sweetland.
What town in Germany?
Wo? Osnabrück.
I know a minister in Osnabrück. I could write to him, and he could send us the necessary documentation for your application. And in the meantime, you could work on your English.
English?
Well, I could help you. I spreche Deutsch. Let's see. Keats?
Keats? Yes.
Ja, Keats.
Dem Schönheit eignet, das liebt immer fort.
Endymion, Part 1. Thing of beauty is a joy forever. Its loveliness increases, but it will never pass into nothingness, but still will keep a bower quiet for us, and a sleep full of sweet dreams and health and quiet breathing.
Breathing?
Breathing.
Breathing?
Breathing.
Breathing.
Yeah, that's very good.
Very cool. So I want to talk about, you've made quite a transition in your career from picking up dog poop, commercials, short films, feature films, pretty much full-time now. If you met another commercial director, which it seems like whenever I talk to a commercial director at a party, they're kicking around the idea of getting into their first feature. What would you tell them? What advice would you offer?
I don't know that I'm really a model to follow because everybody keeps bringing up the 16-year thing. I mean, I think, you know, persistence, stamina, I think no matter how long it takes, if it's 6 months or 16 years, you just have to, you know, focus on what it is you want to do and go for it. Making that first film it's a hard thing because it's, you know, it's in your head and you're insane because of it, and nobody else sees the film, they see the insanity. And so it's really hard to convince people to give you the opportunity or give you the money, or so you just kind of have to stick with it. And you know, there's no formula, there's no, as I said earlier, there's no ladder, there's no anything that's going to solve it for you. You just have to do it on your own terms and figure it out.
So what do you think you would do different?
Nothing.
Do it all the same?
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't make this 16 years ago. It would have been horrible. And I'd be, I don't know what I'd be doing now. Something other than this. You know, I think it was, it happened when it was supposed to happen. And any frustration I had leading up to then was my own issue. You know, I just don't, and I think my next film will happen when it's supposed to happen. I think they come together in interesting ways. If I had made it when I first optioned the story, Elizabeth Reeser was in grade school. And I don't think it would have been the film that it is.
It's a different story.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I want to thank you for coming by today. I really enjoyed our discussion today.
Pleasure.
So that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for stopping in on Butter City. If you have an idea for a show or you have a comment on a show, check us out at www.buttercity.com. Thanks. We'll see you.
Support for Butter City is provided by